I've now made over 500 YouTube videos recommending FIFA career mode save ideas. I've posted a few series of my own, including 2 Megacareers and 1 race across Europe. But today we're turning the tables, because in our final FC24 episode, I'm looking at another 10 of your career mode saves, and I'll be rating them based on how good I think they are. All of the saves posted in today's video were first posted over on my Discord server, so if you're interested in being in one of these videos in the future, make sure you join with the link in the description below and get involved. Don't forget to play along by posting your ratings in the comments below or over on Discord so we can try and figure out the best save of all time. Today I've picked out 10 of the best saves that were submitted over the past couple of months, so where are we going to be heading to first? Well, the first save actually comes from the Pyrenees Mountains in southern France, where Sousa has created ES Lourdes in career mode's create a club mode. I really like the save's background information here. There's an entire post that's dedicated to the history and the founding of the club, and a lot of the information in this post is then used throughout the career to keep it realistic. There's things like the 3 Dubois brothers, Anthony, Nicolas and Jeremy, who were all part of the team when they created the club. Almost every single player in the squad has a post with some background information, which just made reading the thread even more fun. There was only a single season posted over on Discord so far, but this thread is still worth talking about. The story goes like this: in the early years, Lourdes fought for promotion from the amateur divisions of France and eventually in 2023 appeared in the second division. That's where Sousa took over, and in season 1 the goal was just to avoid relegation. After every match, a new graphic was then posted to the thread, and there were interesting press conference answers to give us a little bit more background and lore to the save, and results were about what you would expect. However, Lourdes would eventually finish in the playoffs. They would beat Bordeaux and win promotion, but to make the story more fun, they were actually denied promotion on a technicality. That's as far as this save has gone so far, but this wasn't Sousa's only thread either. There's another really good one about the fully realistic Athletic Bilbao save, but we'll talk about that later in the video. Let's rate this save first. As always, we'll be rating the saves based on realism, save idea quality and difficulty, with 10 being the highest and 1 being the lowest. Let's start off with realism, and Create a Club is hard to keep realistic, but this save did a good job of it. It's only a single season, but the transfers, formations, background and everything else about the save really did make a lot of sense, so I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. For difficulty, clearly the club was relegation level and somehow ended up in the playoffs, but this does happen in the French second division and some random results can happen, so I'd say the games were maybe a little bit too easy, but it's still an 8 out of 10 save for difficulty. Finally, for the save idea, Create a Club saves are almost always unique unless it's something like Red Bull Leeds, Red Bull London or Red Bull Paris, so this is going to be a 9 out of 10. Of course, post your ratings in the comments like I said below, and we'll probably do a knockout competition to try and find the best save that I've ever rated very soon over on my Twitter. I've been doing these save review videos now for nearly 2 years, so let's review a player career mode for the first time. It might be hard to rate, but I really enjoyed reading about Marco's German player career. He created a player called Max Weber, who was born in Hamburg, raised in Hamburg, and would sign for Hamburg as an 18-year-old. Weber had one of the most crazy first seasons ever. He would smash in 41 goals in the second division, he'd win Player of the Year, and finally agree a move to Borussia Dortmund. You might think that this was a strange move, but to make things more unique, one of the other members of the Discord called Mythical actually acted as the agent and decided where Marco was going to move his player around throughout his career. I do like that Marco also created some graphics of sponsorship opportunities that Weber went on to accept. They might not be the cleanest graphics we'll see in this video, but they're still something that I've never seen in one of these saves before. Weber would stay at Dortmund for a second season despite interest from Manchester City, and he'd continue scoring goals and winning Player of the Month awards. His performances led to a Germany call-up for the 2026 World Cup, a Champions League final win and also a move to Barcelona. Weber basically carried Germany to the final, including one of the most outrageous goals I've ever seen in a FIFA game. With the goalkeeper up the pitch trying to equalise, Weber would kill the match off by scoring from about the halfway line, and Germany would get a 5th World Cup title. The move to Spain didn't really work out, but finally in season 6, a 22-year-old Weber would win the Ballon d'Or and basically complete football. That's where this save ends, and now it's time to rate our first ever player career mode save. It's actually quite hard to compare player career mode to manager mode, but let's try and rate it anyway, because it seems like the difficulty could have been a tad low, but it's not that hard to actually score at least a goal a game in player career mode even at the right difficulty. I'm going to have to give it a 6 out of 10 for that. For realism, the moves do make sense even if they're a bit fast and a bit sudden, so an 8 out of 10 for realism. Finally, the save idea is quite good, there is a legitimate background and history to the player picking all of his clubs, so let's go with an 8.5 right there. Thank you for submitting, and let me know in the comments if you'd be interested in seeing more player career modes getting into these rating videos. After our first ever player career mode save, let's also review our first ever Romanian save. Fishfinger has rebuilt Bucharest to be a prominent European contender over the course of a 15-season career. Of course, it's quite ambitious to say you're going for 15 seasons before you've even played the first one, but on this occasion, I think it's actually paid off. Phase 1 of the save was to try and dominate the Romanian league, and this was done by focusing on youth development and trying to qualify past the group stages in Europe every single season. Without wanting to rush through the story here, Bucharest would be doing all of this within 3 years, where they would win the league, the domestic cup, and also make into the last 16 of the Conference League pretty quickly into the save. This resulted in Fishfinger also being offered the Romanian national team job. With the extra pressure of rebuilding an entire nation, Bucharest would then get drawn into a really tough Champions League group. You could argue that Rennes, Arsenal and Napoli are all potential group winners. However, Romania had grown a lot by this point of the save, and the national team had even managed to beat France due to the growth of some of the Bucharest Academy players. This difficult group was in Season 5, and that's also the most recently finished and posted season, but Bucharest would somehow manage to win their Champions League group. In the same year, an academy graduate would go on to leave and eventually win the Golden Boy award in the same year, while Dinamo would eventually give Real Madrid a decent game in the quarter-finals of the Champions League. The total rebuild was basically finished, and it looked like both club and country were on the absolute rise. So let's rate Fishfinger's save. It is actually really hard to keep saves in some of these smaller nations realistic, because if somewhere like Romania did try and rebuild their entire football federation, it would take a lot of money and probably about 20 years to get to France's level. That's why I'm giving this save a 7 out of 10 for realism. I think the idea is good and unique though, so 9 out of 10 for that, and I think the difficulty was about right looking at some of the results, so an 8 out of 10 for that. Thank you for sharing, and of course, if you want to go more in depth in any of the saves I talk about, join the Discord and you can read them straight away. Okay, so while all 3 of these saves we've looked at so far were amazing, I was also sent some interesting save ideas that weren't quite ready to be rated. Still, it was fun to read about Sodium's save where he put Kendrick Lamar in charge of LAFC, then put LAFC in Europe, or Tuo's FIFA 22 save with Fenerbahce, Zaki's Odense Bowl Club save where he had Ericsson as manager, or Generic User 2's Cornwall save. I hope all 4 of you keep sharing your saves because I keep wanting to read more about them. Okay, so before we look at more saves as well, I thought I'd update you on one of my favourite submissions that we looked at in the last episode. Stephen has continued his Melbourne victory save in England, and he's done loads more story, loads more graphics, and loads more kits, and because this is the last save review video I'll make for FC24, I'll actually remove any channel restrictions so everyone can join the Discord and read the posts. It's fully worth 10 minutes of your day if you are interested in any of these saves. Anyway, let's get back to rating some. I'm sure you'll agree with me that even at the best of times, supporting Everton isn't always enjoyable. Jeremy Crazy Kid's save with them proves that this can also be really fun to read about. With the goal of trying to rebuild and get Everton back into Europe, just about everything bad that can happen in career mode would happen in this save. Things didn't all start out too badly though. He sold 11 players, bought players like Brian Brobby, Ivan Ilčić, Marcus Edwards, Jack McGlynn and Duncan Maguire, and the first disaster really happened at the end of the first transfer window. This is because Nathan Patterson's release clause was triggered, meaning Ben Godfrey was forced into the starting 11 because there wasn't enough time to replace him. Despite this, the first season still went okay, even with the club having to eventually start a 53 overall striker for a few of the games later in the year. Season 2 is where things start to get a little bit more hilarious, because Liverpool would trigger Marcus Edwards' release clause. Jeremy just about keeps him at Everton by offering a record contract, but in a game against Wolves, Jose Sarr would make 13 saves and the AI would start 7 defenders. A few games later, Everton had to start a 6'7" centre-back at right-back because of the amount of injuries. Even with the game fully against them, Everton would go on to challenge for the Champions League. There's about another 1,000 posts in this thread, but I'm going to finish it off by telling you about Frederick James. This guy came through the academy at Everton, would go on to score a winner against Liverpool, and was just generally the key attacker in this unusual formation that the Everton team would go on to use. It's also worth giving Brian Brobby a smaller shout out because Jeremy just about managed to get him to the potential he had in some of these older FIFA games. Before this video becomes 30 minutes long, we need to rate this save, and for realism, it's always going to be kind of hard to keep a rebuild realistic. I do like the players that you signed. I also like that you decided to avoid free agents and regens, so I'm going to give you an 8 out of 10 right here. The save idea is also kind of standard, but I do like the direction you took it, so it's going to be another 8 out of 10. Finally, for difficulty, I think the matches might have been slightly too easy, but from the clips, I think you'll agree it wasn't actually that easy. I'm going to give you an 8 out of 10 for difficulty as well. I hope you like Jeremy's save because, like I said, there was so much more information I could have included, and as always, go read through it if you're interested in finding out more. For our 5th review, we're heading to the northwest of France, where Behave has posted another 1000 post thread about his Journeyman career. I love reading about these careers, and Behave obviously likes sharing them too, because this is one of the most commented on threads in the entire server. It all begins in the MLS, where a young manager called James Walker is given the head coach job at New York Red Bulls. With the Red Bulls top of the Eastern Conference, Marco Reus and Wissam Ben Yedder decide to join the club as they go for the title. But with the club just days away from the US Open Cup final, Walker's offered the job at the London-based club Millwall. His move started well. He took over a 3rd place Millwall team that looked like it could be heading to the Premier League and still managed to improve them. Despite their reputation for being brutes, the football at Millwall was actually quite fun to watch. There was skill moves, there was quick passing and lots of goals, so of course this didn't go unnoticed. Just a few months later, there were rumours he was going to move again, and Behave created the video you're about to watch.
James Walker, where could we even start? 75 games, 38 wins, 135 goals scored. Trainer everyone needs. Welcome, James Walker.
With the move to Luton confirmed, Walker would somehow win 4 of his first 9 Premier League matches. Just like in the MLS and at Millwall, there were tons of goals flying in, and with 5 games left in the season, somehow Luton were in a Champions League spot. Wins against Newcastle and Brighton saw Luton confirm European football was heading to the Kenny for Season 4. Luton would go on to top the Champions League group and sign some pretty interesting players along the way. Not many people go out their way to sign Raheem Sterling or Facundo Pellistri, but they both fit in on this Luton team. Eventually, Atletico Madrid would knock Luton out in the quarterfinals, and Behave would then move to join Stade Brest in France. This was just a super condensed look through at this save, so if you want to know how the French season goes, check it out by looking in the description below. Anyway, let's rate this save, and for realism, as we mentioned earlier, despite the successes Luton had, the manager moves were actually quite realistic. I think it was a good attempt, so I'm going to give it an 8.5 for that. The save idea is cool too. I've never really seen a Journeyman save with this level of teams, and it's a great idea for a save, so I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10 for that. And finally, for difficulty, I think the matches might have been a little bit too easy, but again, from the clips I saw, they didn't look too bad, so I'm going to give you a 7.5 for difficulty. I hope you guys also enjoyed Behave's save, because like I said, there was so much effort went into sharing all of these images, videos, and getting the community involved with polls, so thanks for sending in your save, and I hope you keep sharing until James Walker decides it's time to retire. Okay, this video is getting quite long right now, so let's talk about that Athletic Bilbao save I mentioned earlier. Once again, this is from Souza, and this thread is possibly my favourite that I've ever been sent. I always enjoy reading about realistic Bilbao saves, but this one is actually quite amazing. While Souza's Lourdes save is just getting started, 4 seasons of this save were actually posted. To give you an idea about how long this save was, the first post was on the 29th of March, and the most recent and final update was posted on the 27th of June. That means there's 3 whole months of graphics, transfers, tables, press conferences, goals, and lots of drama. And I doubt I'll do it justice in this short recap, so go check it out when you finish this video. At the start of the first season, Emiliano Fernandez, who is Souza's 30-year-old coach, was promoted to the first team in Bilbao. The season started off really well, with Bilbao actually fighting for the title, and Iker Muniain actually fighting for Player of the Month in October, November, and December. Of course, Souza was following Bilbao's Cantera rule, and as you've seen, some of the gameplay was absolutely amazing. Despite Muniain's 14 goals and 20 assists, Bilbao would just miss out on the title in Season 1 to Madrid. To keep things a bit more challenging, some big bids were accepted in the first transfer window. This decimated the midfield that Sousa had been using. Sansei would go on to move to United, while Madrid would trigger Ivan Martin's £55 million release clause. And if you're wondering, Nico Williams had already had his release clause triggered back in Season 1. Even with these setbacks, the second season still went really well. Sousa won 2 trophies, the Spanish Cup and the Spanish Super Cup, while reaching the Champions League quarter-finals. Season 3 had another crazy end because just with 2 games left, Sousa could have won the league, but once again, Bilbao would miss out on the title. This recap is getting pretty long now, but I feel like I have to tell you about the storyline for Season 4. To make things tougher, over €1 billion was spent by the big 3 Spanish clubs. Bilbao didn't join in on the spending, but it seemed like the team was still just about good enough to compete. With 5 games to go, this was proven because Bilbao were fully in the fight for first. Come May, the season was over and there were still questions to answer. Would Bilbao win the league? Would they beat Arsenal in the Champions League final? And was Sousa about to leave Bilbao? Well, the answer to all 3 questions was yes. With a quadruple secured, Sousa handed the reins over to Yuri Bacice and the save was finally finished. That was a marathon of a rundown, but I hope you agree that the entire story was worth sharing. So let's rate this save, and for realism, as we mentioned earlier, the squad and general idea are very believable. A coach joining the first team is a good attempt at realism, so I'm going to give you a 9.5 right here. The save idea is cool too, but not crazy original. I do see a lot of Bilbao saves getting submitted, so we're going to give this an 8 out of 10. Finally, for difficulty, clearly the difficulty isn't actually too easy. In fact, I'd say it's basically spot on. The matches look tough, the challenge from other clubs is accurate, and I like the transfer drama in the final year, so I'm going to give you a 9 out of 10 for difficulty. I hope you guys also enjoyed Sousa's second save, and thanks for sending both of them in, and thank you to everyone who sent any save in, because I did make sure I read every single one, and I wish I could have used them all. This next save is another one that uses a lot of storylines, interviews and graphics, and all 3 of these parts of the save are actually really good. The main storyline revolves around the manager, Maxi Afonso, who worked his way up from coach to manager at Hamburg. Other than storylines, it's a classic rebuild save with the goal of becoming the best team in Germany and then the best team in Europe. Hamburg took a step towards those goals by confirming promotion in Season 1, and then in the process built a realistically rated squad to try and survive in the Bundesliga for Season 2. Season 2's big storyline was about Volkswagen actually investing in Hamburg and giving them a slightly bigger budget, and the season went really well. Some early wins against Bayern Munich set the tone, and by matchday 18, Hamburg were in second place, just 4 points behind Leipzig. Sadly though, Hamburg would lose to Leipzig, but the form for the rest of the season was pretty insane. In May of Season 2, one of the original German giants finally won a title for the first time in ages, because Hamburg actually overcame that 7-point gap to win both the Bundesliga and the German DFB Pokal. There was a lot of nice goals, there were some realistic signings, and it was just generally a fun short save where Hamburg went from the second tier to the best team in Germany in less than 24 months. So let's rate this save, and despite the rapid rise, I think the team's ratings were about where you'd expect for a mid-table Bundesliga side. You might be thinking, well, how can this be the case because they actually won the Bundesliga, but I think it was actually just the difficulty that was too low. For realism, we'll go 7.5, and for difficulty, I'm going to give it a 6. The save idea is a fun one though, because Mythical clearly identified Hamburg as a club with a lot of history and potential, and while Hamburg is a popular save, using storylines is still a fun way to use them. Because of the storylines, I'm going to give them an 8 out of 10 for the save's idea. Looking back, the low ratings do seem quite harsh because I did enjoy reading about the save, and thank you for sharing it anyway. Right, so now we have just 2 saves left to review this year, and it's a good time to have a look at another Creator Club save. This time it was Ahmed's amateur Saudi club, who looked to have some of the lowest ratings I've ever seen in a FIFA rated team. In fact, the 48 rated Al Shamari was the team superstar, and the bench had a 27 rated Ahmed and a 28 rated Abdullah. The storyline behind this team is that they won a place in the first division by winning a regional competition, and now have to try to survive by promoting youth players and selling any player that gets a value of over £80,000. I think this is such a unique starting situation, with the storyline and restrictions guaranteeing a fun save. As you'd expect, it was a massive struggle for this team to do anything. Benzema's Al Ittihad beat them 8-0 in the first couple of matches, and in fact the club would only score 5 goals in the first 10 games. From the same first 10 games though, the team would only earn a single point. However, academy prospects like Ghanaian Frank John slowly did improve the team, and by the end of the season, the club would actually finish 15th. Every season after this saw the team slowly get better and better, with youth players like Prevlak, Kante and Abdul Rahman all either earning first team spots or earning the club a lot of money by being sold. We leave this save in Season 5 where Ahmed has won 6, drawn 2 and lost none of his first 8 games, so the club is finally in a stable condition where it can actually challenge to try and get into the Asian Champions League spaces. So this was a bit of a different style of save, but it's time to rate it, and I like the realistic ratings the club was created with. I'm sure amateur level players in Saudi Arabia are probably in the 20s for overall, so it's going to be a 9 out of 10 for realism. The save idea is also just so unique. I've never had anything like this before, and it's not something I've ever really seen anywhere else either, except when a couple of people might have done this with San Marino or Liechtenstein, putting them in the German and Italian leagues. So I'm going to give this a 9.5 for save idea. You could probably even argue it should be higher. If you think it should be, let me know in the comments, and also let me know what you think the save difficulty should be as well, because it's quite hard to judge from how bad the starting squad were. I'm going with a 9 out of 10, and it was such a fun save to read. I didn't give it enough justice putting it in this video, and thanks for putting so much effort into the submission. Okay, so for our final save, we have already looked at one player career mode, and this next save is actually an owner career mode. Confusic, who's one of the mods over on Discord, has sent a save across where he's tried to rebuild Crystal Palace without ever actually playing a game. The first window was the biggest part of the rebuild, and nearly £100 million was spent on 5 signings. 9 players would leave the club in July alone, and to keep things realistically, Palace also agreed to sell Mark Gahey to Spurs and Michael Elise to Liverpool in August. By the end of the season, the team was rebuilt and finally ready to press on. In Season 2, Adam Wharton and Ejeberry Eze left for another £90 million, and it didn't look like Palace would actually miss them. Their second season 6th place finish was an improvement on last year, and as always seems to be the case in FIFA career mode, Eddie Nketiah was one of the signings of the season. To keep things interesting into Season 3, there was a summer storyline of financial issues at Palace that saw Oliver Glasner leave, so Vincent Kompany would come in to replace him. There were also some really nice transfers in Season 3. Wan-Bissaka would return to Palace, Ryan Cherki would get a big move from Lyon, Lunin and Minty both arrived for over £30 million, and suddenly the squad was stacked in every single position. There were some decent goals, but the club could still only finish 7th place, and this saw Confusic get sacked as director of football, Kompany also leave the club, and the save submission would end right here. I really like the realism in the transfers and basically everything that Confusic did in this entire save, and I'm going to have to rate it really highly for this. I did give out a 9.9 in one of the last episodes, but I think this save probably deserves like a 9.7. The whole thread was basically like reading a real life football club's history, and I really do rate that part of the submission. However, I can't really rate this save for difficulty because no games have actually been played. The Premier League is a tough league to do owner saves in, so I'm just going to give it a 7 out of 10. Finally, for save ideas, I love owner saves. I love playing them, I love reading about them, I love editing them, and I love sharing them with you guys. So the reasoning behind this save was pretty interesting too. I'm going to give it a 9.5 for the save idea, and thank you for sharing it, and I'm sure every single person watching this video, even though we are nearly at 23 minutes in, enjoyed hearing about it. Thank you to everyone who's watched this video or any of the rating saves video throughout the past. If you haven't watched them all, check out the playlist I'll put on screen in a second where you can go back and watch all 10 or 12 episodes that I've made so far. But thank you for watching, really do appreciate it. I'll see you soon, cheers and goodbye.